Hey, and welcome to Board with Life News for May 23rd. Today I'm going to talk about Lost Cities Rivals, Azul Giant Edition, Betrayal Legacy, Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small, and the Kickstarter for Sprawlopolis. Let's get to it. Lost Cities Rivals is coming out from Cosmos Games. This is a 2 to 4 player implementation of Rainier Knizia's classic 2-player game Lost Cities. Lost Cities is one of my favorite 2-player games. I'm really interested to see if they're able to keep the tension in that game, because it's a very tense game. The design's really nice because it's very simple mechanics, but you get a lot of tension and stress out of them. Reading about it, it seems like it's much the same, except there's an added auction mechanic added to the game. Honestly, the description didn't, like, reading about it, I didn't go like, oh wow, that seems like that would be great. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but Knizia is kind of the king of auctions in games, so I imagine him putting an auction mechanic in one of his classic games is probably going to be a good thing, so I have high hopes for this one. Azul Giant Edition was just announced from Plan B Games. I don't want to say that's the news. Azul Giant Edition. It's a giant edition of Azul. So they've been showing at conventions, they have like a briefcase giant version of Azul, and I guess people were saying, oh, I'd really like to buy that. So they went, okay, we'll take your money. And they have pre-orders up now on their site. If they get at least 500 pre-orders, they will sell it. It has big playmats, tiles that are twice as big, like locking briefcase that everything fits nicely in, but it's going to cost about 300 bucks. So, yeah, I guess if your main complaint about Azul was that it didn't cost 10 times what you paid for it, then here's the solution. Betrayal Legacy had some new information released about it. This is a legacy version of the classic game Betrayal at House on Haunted Hill, which was originally co-designed with Rob Daviau as one of the designers, and he is designing the legacy version, so that makes perfect sense. Rob Daviau is the legacy guy. This is one of his classic games. The game also, like, is such a perfect vehicle for legacy. It's going to take place over hundreds of years. It starts out in the year 1666 and will go to like the year 2004. Each time you play, you're playing like a new generation of people. One of the things that was really interesting to me is basically they're going through history, and different people, at different times in history, people were afraid of different things. So it's saying like in the early 1800s, like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein came out. So they'll have haunts inspired by that. Or when Edgar Allan Poe was around, haunts inspired by that. So that seems really cool to me. That's a fun thing. I'm a big horror nerd, so that seems great. This is going to come out November 9th, they said, which they said in the article I read that, like, November is the spookiest month. It's like, if you don't have October? Like, October is clearly the spookiest month. So I would have loved if they could have gotten this out as like an early October release so you could play it as like a Halloween thing. That seems like it would be a lot of fun. But nope, November 9th. Betrayal at House on the Hill is one of the best games at creating like story experiences, like that type of game where you still talk to your friends about that one game you played where it's like, oh man, you remember when we were playing Betrayal and you got that one card and then all of a sudden the house was flying and we all had to get parachutes, but not all of us got parachutes. So that's great for a legacy game that you're creating these like narrative moments. However, Betrayal at House on Hill is also one of the wonkiest games that can go wrong and like in a weird broken way a lot. The good outweighs the bad for me on that, where it's like, yeah, sometimes you play and it just doesn't really work quite right. Whereas other times you play and it's great. So in legacy games, if it kind of gets wonky and then continues to like echo out of that wonkiness, it can go super bad. So I imagine they've addressed that because they're probably aware of it. But yeah, so I've got really high hopes, but also not getting too far ahead of myself on this one. It's going to be 75 bucks. Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small, is coming back into print with a big box edition. This is going to be the base game of Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small, which is the 2-player implementation of Uwe Rosenberg's classic game Agricola. This is also going to include the 2 previously released expansions, buildings, and even more buildings. And it is going to have new wooden components, like shaped wooden components for workers and resources, which they seem to keep doing to Rosenberg games. They reprint them, you get slightly nicer bits. So Agricola, All Creatures Big and Small is a great 2-player game. I'm excited about this for people who weren't able to get it when it was originally released. This week's Kickstarter is for Sprawlopolis. This is a cooperative city-building microgame. It's only 18 cards, and it's the newest release in the ever-growing wallet game series from Button Shy Games. There's like 20 or 30 of them at this point. Sprawlopolis is an interesting city-building game where you're collectively, it's for 1 to 4 players, you're collectively laying cards to kind of build out your city, but there's a variable scoring system. At the beginning of each game, you're going to reveal 3 different cards, and that's kind of how you are going to score the game. It also gives you the threshold of points you need to get above. So it'll tell you, like, you'll get points this game for these 3 things, but you have to get the total number of points they show on the card added together in order to win the game. So I like that it's a point system, but also there's a win-lose in a cooperative point game. That's cool. This is the design team behind Circle of the Wagons, which was a hugely popular micro game that came out, I think, last year from Button Shy Games. So there's a lot of interest in this because it's a continuation of that. It is $10 right now on Kickstarter. That's the news for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Chris Bryan Games on there. Also, make sure you check out my Patreon, linked below. There's awesome exclusive reward tier things that you can have access to if you're into that kind of thing. And just a reminder, this is also a podcast, so it's just the audio from this video. If you would rather learn about games via podcast, go subscribe to that on whatever you get podcasts on. This week's question comes from @KindredDada, and they ask, when you make design decisions early in development, do you consider your audience, or do you just focus on the game you want to play? So when I'm designing games early in development, yes, I do consider audience. And it's not that I am limiting or not making the game I want to make. I'm still making the game I want to play. But I am thinking about, usually I'll think about, like, what publisher would this game fit well in, or fit well with, and that's kind of just adding a goalpost. It's like, when you're early in development of a game, it can go in 1,000 directions often, so it's kind of like helping me to zero in what I'm designing and kind of what, it's giving myself artificial restraints so that I can kind of focus in the design to actually get a game and not just like 1,000 ideas all over the place. I won't even necessarily wind up pitching it to that publisher, or it might change later. But I do kind of think about it that way. I also think about it as a product in that I'm not going to make, a light 10-minute game that has $60 worth of components in it. Where it kind of needs to match the price point, the size, box size, all that stuff kind of needs to match the weight and what people expect from the game. So looking at what publishers have is also a good... I just had like a gnat fly into... hopefully not my mouth. We'll see in the instant replay. Sorry. Knowing kind of what publishers are putting out in terms of that type of product helps to give you a better idea of kind of what components you can include. So it is publishable, because ultimately I want to make games that people play. I don't just want to make them as like thought experiments. Yeah, good question. Thanks for it, and I will see you next week.